Well, I guess we're live now. What's going on, guys? Make sure to let me know if you can hear me, anything like that. Gonna try to figure out how to get my comments to come up, so 1 second. Yeah. This is gonna be fun figuring this out. How can I pull up comments? I am not a live streamer, so please bear with me while we do this. Oh, wait. There. Good. Video accessibility. How do I get the comments? How do I make my comments come up? This is absolutely ridiculous. Let's see. Let's go where we are. Make sure we are. Yeah. I guess let's pull that up here. Then we can get started. So I can at least read comments because for some reason it's not coming up on my streaming service. Let's go to settings. Alright, whatever. We just do it this way. Now, how is the stream looking too? I'd love to know that because my internet is absolutely crazy. Let's see. What's going on, guys? Now I can see your comments at least from the live chat. Guess we'll set that up right there. Oh, hope everybody's had a good day. It's been hectic for me. Been running around like a chicken with my head cut off. Got 2 sick kids again. One's got pneumonia for sure. The other one probably does. His fever spiked up to 103.5 earlier, so had to wait to go live until later tonight. Let's see, picture's good. Pop out live chat, move your screen wherever you want to. Looks good. Can I? Using OBS? Let's see. Let's go back to this. Click on this. It's gonna get a little wonky. Let me mute it. There. Okay. So, how can I pop that out? Pop out chat. Over here. Go low. Okay, great. That looks good. Everybody right there. So, the Idaho situation. You say no sound or picture? Am I muted? Turn the computer off and on. Yeah, that's usually the fix for me for sure. Am I muted though? Can you hear me still? Everything's still right? Somebody said they lost sound. But I was just thinking about the Bryan Kohberger situation, right? And everybody knows, yeah, you're innocent until proven guilty. There's a lot that makes him look guilty, but I feel like it's important that we know that we only heard one side of the story so far. So of course he looks guilty. Um, like of course, why wouldn't he look guilty? There's no picture. Not this. All right. So of course he looks guilty when we only get one side of the story, right? But is he guilty? We don't know yet. Now, I really haven't had a whole lot of time today, so I don't know if there's some new crazy stuff. It seems like every day there's some more stuff coming out about it. And, it's hard to keep up with, really, because everybody's got an opinion and everybody's got something to say. You got some girl he went on a Tinder date with 7, 8 years ago, posting that she went on a Tinder date with this killer, and then all of a sudden upset that she's getting a lot of attention. Uh, that type of stuff, like, you knew you were going to get that attention before you posted your post about going out with him. So if it's a problem, why did you even post that? It didn't add anything to anything. We didn't get any real information, just a clout chase basically off of, you know, this type of situation. But anyway, I wanted to go through and I wanted to watch this one video from Law and Crime, top 7 developments post Bryan Kohberger affidavit release. I feel like that's pretty conclusive, right? Like the top 7 since the affidavit came out. What else have we learned? And felt like I wanted to watch that, so figured I'd hang out with you guys for a little while and start to watch it. Let's get into it.
I'm Jeanette Levy, and welcome to Law and Crime Sidebar Podcast. It feels like every day we've learned something new, either about Bryan Kohberger or the murder case, or about the victims, since the probable cause affidavit was released. You'll recall that Bryan Kohberger is charged with murdering 4 University of Idaho students. They are Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. When Kohberger was arrested in an early morning raid on his parents' home in Pennsylvania more than 2 weeks ago, the news was a surprise. He's someone that wasn't on the public's radar, but the affidavit says Moscow police had been aware of him since late November. When he was arrested, many wondered, who will represent him? His family said they couldn't afford to hire a lawyer, and with this possibly being a death penalty case, the public defenders in Latah County, Idaho, were not qualified to handle it. Ann Taylor is the chief public defender for the Coeur d'Alene area in Idaho, about 2 hours north of Moscow, and she was appointed to represent Bryan Kohberger.
Ms. Taylor, do you wish to argue bail at this time?
Your Honor, I would like to ask the court.
Got another murderer off based on a lie that a cop told. And she got the case right before the arrest, and she's the one who put a pause. Can I switch myself and the video? Yeah, I'm sure I can, but let's see. Boop. Right there. And then let's drag that under me. Now let's make me smaller. Boom. Is that better? Maybe that's the way we want to go. So, she's got somebody off already for it. She got the house cleanup. That might be something that comes back up later because the cops wanted to go ahead and start the cleanup before the defense ever had a chance to go and check out the scene. And I feel like they're going to try to use that regardless, especially with this lawyer. If she's already caught a cop in a lie, she's going to probably come at this, except for his statement when he said he was eager to be exonerated. And that's kind of weird too, because we all know what he means there. He's eager to be found innocent, right? But exonerated, doesn't that mean that you're found guilty and then you're exonerated on all charges? So that was his direct influence to put that in. Is there a reason for that or not? What do you guys think about that? Let's read some of these comments. The rescues I work with have been taking in animals from Northern and Southern California. JRL, I agree. I feel the same. So many things don't make sense. Who's JRL? See, you're watching some of the other. After watching some of the other YouTubers shown on several nighttime shows this weekend, it truly is refreshing to listen to someone who doesn't just run their lips without hard evidence. Yeah, well, I try not to like accuse people. I'm just watching this stuff and reading this stuff just like everybody else, and then I'm just posting my opinion about it and coming on and talking to people who are also interested in this. The main reason I even do the YouTube stuff at all is so that I can chat back and forth with people in the comments and put my ideas and my thoughts out there. But yeah, everything that I say during this live, because I mean it's live, I can't go back and edit things out. Everything's alleged at the moment, so I'm not trying to point any fingers toward anybody or do anything crazy, make any bold statements. It's just my opinion, and when I'm watching this stuff, it's whatever comes to my mind first. It doesn't mean I'm right, doesn't mean I'm wrong, just whatever, you know? Let's watch some more of this.
Mr. Kohberger right now is on a no bond hold, but it's a limited request as I don't have enough information.
Court records that were recently unsealed showed that Taylor was appointed to represent Kohberger within hours of his arrest on December 30th. She immediately filed motions invoking his right to counsel, saying law enforcement should not speak to him, and she won an order to preserve the crime scene. Police had started cleaning out that King Road house that very day. Next, Kaylee Gonsalves' sister, Olivia, spoke recently, just in the last...
Like I said, the fact that they started cleaning the house that very day and then she put a stop to it either makes me feel like she should have been allowed time to go in and see the scene herself and the cops were trying to put something past, or she's going to try to use that to try to say that, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not computing all the way in my head of what I'm trying to say here, but, you know, a defense attorney's job is to try to deter any proof. The defense attorney's job isn't she has to prove Bryan didn't do it. She just has to stop the prosecution from proving that Bryan did do it. And I feel like that's a lot of her motives on the cleanup and the recreation and all the things that she did. Even the postponing the hearing, you know, the trial, whatever, for 6 months until June. I feel like she's trying to make sure she gets all her ducks in a row. And for the people who are like, well, if he was innocent, he would want a speedy trial. Well, his life hangs in the bounds here, right? Innocent or guilty. If he's found guilty, he's going to be put. Cops have just went around accusing everybody, you know? Like, we had the problem that why are all these people cleared? How do you know these people are cleared? Now, obviously, they've known about Bryan for a long time. A lot longer than what we thought they knew about Bryan, right? We thought that they didn't have a suspect, that they were chasing this white car, that they didn't know if it was going to be, you know, anything or not, when in reality, ever since like 2 weeks after the murder, they've been on Bryan. They've been watching, they've been going through, following him apparently, watching him wear gloves everywhere. They've been doing their investigation, getting all their records, getting all their ducks in a row, so that when they arrested him, they had good probable cause to bring him back. Now, what probable cause do they have so far, right? They have his DNA on the sheet, which I spoke about this before, but if we can say that Bryan is possibly a knife guy, and I say that because if he committed these crimes with a knife, that's not an easy task. I know people think like, oh, well, it's if you got a knife and the other person doesn't, then that's easy. But you have to overpower that person. You have to repeatedly swing that blade. If you don't know what you're doing, or if you haven't used it before, we'll get into that in a minute, then it's going to be very strenuous on you, right? 4 people in that small amount of time with your adrenaline through the roof, whoever did it, I feel like they would know about knives. And if Bryan was really into knives, then he could have the defense on, well, maybe I owned that knife before, but I sold it. Or maybe I was at that house doing something, let's say, buying drugs. You know, we know that's a party house. We know that's a drug area. We know Bryan's got a history with heroin. So if he can come out and try to use all that to his defense, like I said, all he's got to do is introduce some reasonable doubt, like, well, his DNA could be there because of that. Prove that it's not, and that's where the state's prosecution has to really come in and prove that it's not. Prove that he was there and did that. And then you've got the cell phone pings, right? The cell phone pings that put him in the area 12 times before the murders, none after the murders. But does it put him right at their house? Like, how close are those cell phone pings? How was he just in Moscow? Was he just in the neighborhood? Or was he right outside the house, watching the house, out in the woods, out back, spying on people? And then they said that his phone has pinged on the Wi-Fi at some time. Could he use that and try to say something like, "Oh yeah, well, I was there buying drugs, or I was there at a party one night, or I took somebody home, hung out with somebody, gave somebody a ride," whatever. We keep hearing that there's no, let me see. Yeah, I don't have mods. I don't really get the point. Like, as long as people aren't typing super crazy stuff in the comments, then, I'm not a live streamer, so I don't know if I actually have to have them or not. But if you see anything that needs to be done something about in the comments, let me know. But I'm pretty relaxed on that for the most part. I'm a pretty open, free speech type of person. I know they go crazy and say some crazy stuff, and you have people trying to come on the camera and naked and stuff. I'm not going to do none of that. But as far as the mods, I don't even know how any of that works. I'm not a live streamer at all, but I will probably email you to try to talk about it later and see if I can figure out, because I'm wanting to do a live stream like once a week at least, and not like a super long one. I can't do a super long one, but I want to do one like once a week and actually have a show planned for it, stuff to go through. Today was just a spur of the moment. I wanted to see how the internet would do, because I'm still waiting on fiber. They still don't have it ready yet, so I'm stuck at like 15 megabytes per second hard line. So we'll see. But that's the benefits of living down here in the South. But anyway, the evidence that they have on Bryan doesn't seem like it's rock solid. Like, the Pennsylvania defense attorney, he come out and he said, that the defense could poke holes all in it, right? And I feel like they can, unless the police have more. We don't know exactly what the cops have there. We don't know if they have more than what they put in the arrest affidavit, or if they threw everything they had. We don't know what they found in his apartment. I do think that it's kind of crazy, though. They have his car. And if he drove that car to go commit the murders, and it was as bloody and as gory as they say it was, and he was in and out as quick as he was, wearing what Dylan said she saw him wearing, did he get anything on him? Did he track it out to his car? Did he change clothes? Like, how fast could he have possibly been in and out? We're at like 16 minutes, are we not? So it seems like they should find DNA in the car. And I feel like if they don't find DNA in the car, and they don't find victim's DNA back at his apartment or somewhere, then I think the case is going to be a lot harder than people think it is. Like, emotions get high. You're looking for somebody. You're trying to figure out who it is over and over and over. And then anytime, like, see how to say it. Anytime that the police come out and say, "Yeah, we've got our guy, this is the guy for sure," then you're gonna agree with them mostly, because these cops, they haven't just been loose. They haven't just, "Oh yeah, it could be this person or it could be that person." They're pretty direct. So when they come out and say, "We've got our guy, we've got his DNA at the scene, we've got his phone pings going to the location," it feels like, okay, well, yeah, this is obviously the person. But when it comes to proving that in court, that could be a little different. That's where I would rather somebody who's guilty walk free than someone did it, rather than, "Oh well, they probably did it." I feel like there's a pretty good chance they did it. There's a chance they didn't, but we're gonna go ahead and treat that 80% chance they did it like it's 100 and roll with it, because duh, right? That's what I worry about with this.
several days for the first time since Bryan Kohberger was arrested. Olivia Gonsalves was critically involved in this investigation. She found cell phone records belonging to her sister that helped with the timeline, and she also found that Twitch video of Kaylee and Maddie Mogan at the food truck, in the hours before they were murdered.
Right. And a lot of people, they don't give the Gonsalves family the credit that they deserve. A lot of people like to bash on them because of the things that they said, right? When they were talking about how they feel like the cops didn't do a good enough job and didn't check out this person or that person enough. They did go through and they found a lot of evidence. They didn't go and leak a bunch of stuff that the police told them. They leaked stuff that they found on their own, and then the police didn't want to tell them much because they knew they talked to media. And media, they come at us YouTubers real hard. It feels like every time I watch something, I'm hearing about the crime sleuths on YouTube who go too far and do this or do that. The media goes pretty far itself. I mean, that's where that behavior comes from. If you ever notice, the channels that really take it too far, they're the ones acting like mainstream media. Mainstream media will chase a car down the road, will camp out at somebody's house for weeks at a time waiting for them to open the door to get that shot, like paparazzi. YouTubers, they take it too far, and people should do the right thing and show people the respect they deserve. But I don't feel like that the mainstream media really has much of a leg to stand on to talk about us.
She spoke to News Nation following Kohberger's initial appearance.
I think we always presume, innocence. I don't think it really hit me until the affidavit was released and I was able to kind of read that and process that. And then you not only have a name and a face, but, the beginnings of a case against him. The relief that we all felt having a suspect in custody was, it was like, I can't even describe it. Like the weight of the world was lifted from our shoulders.
Olivia Gonsalves said that she will attend all of the future court appearances. The day that Bryan Kohberger was arrested, Moscow police, with the assistance of police in Pullman, Washington, executed a search warrant on Kohberger's apartment near the campus of Washington State University. As you can imagine, the documents pertaining to that search warrant could reveal a lot of information, including what items were seized by law enforcement. But the warrant and documents related to it are sealed until March 1st of this year, according to an order from the court in Whitman County, Washington.
All right, so I've heard a few things about that, right? I've heard that that warrant was sealed before they ever made the arrest on Bryan. So if that's the case, it kind of changes things a little bit. But the premature end to the investigation, I'm sure some people in here didn't watch my video on that. Why would the judge why would they word it that way, right? If that information got out, it could cause a premature end to the investigation and cause a risk to public safety. That's instigating in my mind. That it automatically comes to me like, okay, exonerating of him that gives some reason you think he didn't do it, or there's something there that's so bad that it will definitely tell us that he did it, but you're not finished. You don't know that he did it alone yet or something. And if we find that out, we'll automatically agree that he did it and stop looking into other people. I don't get how it could cause a risk to public safety unless you're getting off or unless somebody else is involved, right? And then the premature end of the investigation, how can us knowing what evidence they found cause a premature end? If you're scared that, people finding out that the evidence exists is going to hurt the case or make it where he can't get a fair jury trial, I highly doubt that. Now, I do understand the concern for it in somewhere like Moscow, where you've got like 25,000 people and like half of them are college-age students. They're going to know this. So you can basically rule out all those people from Washington State University and Idaho, the University of Idaho, because anybody going to school right there, they're going to know about this case, right? So then you're down to like 12,000 people. The true crime community is not nearly as big as everybody wants to make it out to be. But, I mean, when you only have 12,000 people in a town with a case like this with national attention, slim pickings could be in order for finding a jury who doesn't have any opinion about the case. But they could always just move it over a few towns and they won't have any problem finding a jury. It's not like it's going to stop this guy from getting prosecuted. It may just stop him from being prosecuted where he's at. But I just wanted to talk about that warrant and why they have it sealed till March 1st. I don't know why they waited so long, but I mean, I feel like that's just because that was before they arrested him, or that's what I've heard at least.
It turns out the warrant was requested the day before Kohberger was arrested.
Right.
So,
there.
of course, law enforcement, until after he had been taken into custody. The order sealing those documents said that making this information public before the arrest could have endangered effective law enforcement, possibly public safety. There have been a lot of questions about whether or not Bryan Kohberger knew any of the 4 victims in this case. The families are looking at possible connections. We know that they've been going through social media and things like that. The attorney for the Gonsalves family said they've looked for any connections between Kaylee and Kohberger, and he said this week that Kaylee did not know Bryan Kohberger.
All right, so this seems like something they should be able to find out pretty easily, though, right? Because they have all the phone records for Kohberger and the victims. So if they were communicating back and forth on their phone somehow, I mean, at some point, if you know somebody, if you're friends with them, if you're communicating, if you have any type of relationship that could lead to this, his plan the entire time was for this, but I don't know. I mean, it still seems the whole crime of passion thing, it still screams out to me, right? So, what do you guys think about the incel stuff? I want to hear other people's opinion on the incel stuff because when I look at Kohberger, that initial picture, right? That came out when he was arrested, he looked crazy with his nose all twisted going down and eyes sunken in. I guess that he was, awoken in the middle of the night or whatever. Yeah, he looked like he would be the incel type, but this guy's like 6'1", something like that, 185 pounds. He's not a terrible looking guy. He's going for his doctorate in college. Is he a incel? Is it his mental state that causes him to be an incel? Or is that just something that people... Yes, what about this Papa Roger? He looks like BK and all the strange comments he made. Yeah, and he knew about the sheet, right? Like, the Papa Roger guy, he did say some incel stuff. I guess that's kind of where it's coming from. The only really news I've watched on Papa Roger or whatever is from Crime Circus when he was going over it and talking about could that be BK. He hasn't posted since. Also, like inside looking, outside looking. I'm pretty sure those got debunked that they weren't Bryan Kohberger. But what about the messages, right? That this guy, he's got mental health issues from when he was younger, where he has no empathy at all. He doesn't care about things. He has no remorse for things he does and no connection to people. That really looks bad for him, but at the same time, are you really going to use the Southern logic? He has a connection to Enon Harsh that I'm concerned they're going to use for him as an excuse to be so close. Now, see, that I could see. I could see him and the Enon Harsh guy being friends. I don't know, though, really. They're closer to the same age, but if he was at Enon Harsh's house any of those times, then that's a lot of reasonable doubt. Because how can you ever say that that's not where he was at unless Enon comes out and says, no, he didn't come here? I haven't really thought about that. Why do you say he has a connection to Enon Harsh? Like, what makes you feel like he has a connection? Or who said that? Where did that come from? Let's play this until I get an answer.
And any information the family has gathered has been turned over to Moscow police. It's really unknown at this point in time whether or not any of the other 3 victims crossed paths with Kohberger or knew him in any way. Meanwhile, the attorney for the Gonsalves family, Shannon Gray, offered support for that surviving roommate who's been named as DM in court documents. The affidavit said that she actually heard crying coming from Xana Kernodle's room the morning of the homicides. She heard somebody, it's okay. And she also saw a man she didn't know walking out of the house through a sliding glass door. There have been a lot of questions about why she went back into her room.
Okay, so the Dylan stuff, right? It's always more and more questions that come up for me when I start thinking about the Dylan stuff. You've got a 20-year-old college girl, 19-year-old college girl. She's on the same floor as Ethan and Xana, right? The second floor. She hears the bumping and whatever upstairs. Hold on one second. Enon has a friend named Frankie Arnold. Look him up on YouTube with his name and Trashy Women. That guy lives by Bryan and is also close in age. All incels. Yeah, I'll check that out. But you've got her living on the second floor, not the first floor like we were initially told. And she hears bumps and noises on the third floor, and she just assumes that's Kaylee playing with her dog, right? Normal to be up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But then Xana gets a DoorDash. So here's where I really get thrown off. If you've got Bryan, who left his house at 3 in the morning, so an hour between the time he left his house and supposedly, allegedly, whatever you want to call it, goes into the 1122 King Road residence, right? When he comes in, was he watching the house? Did he see the guy come and deliver the food? Because if he did, then you know that somebody is awake at the house. Or he was the DoorDash guy, took the DoorDash, all the conspiracy theories out. But if he's sitting there and he watches Xana come out and get her DoorDash, why does he go back in a few minutes later? Why does he go in and commit the murders at that time, knowing somebody was awake? That seems risky, especially if he's got all this planned out and he's thinking they're all going to be asleep. It feels risky, right? And then when he comes in the house, we all saw the layout of the house. He has to walk right past to the stairway from the sliding glass doors. So while he walks in, he walks past Dylan's room, goes out, doesn't see anything, just assumes it's Kaylee playing with the dog. Then she hears a woman crying and a man say, "It's okay, I'm here to help you." Just a man's voice. She doesn't know, I guess, if it was Ethan or if it was the killer, the suspect, whatever. She doesn't know. But she hears the man's voice say that. She looks out again. She doesn't see anything. Then, after hearing the bumping and the noises upstairs and the woman crying, those low-toned sounds like a woman crying over in the corner, and I'm on her phone, I can't hear her talking unless I'm listening for it, right? So if I'm listening for something, you're not going to hear a struggle. They said Xana had defensive wounds. We know that on the affidavit that was released, a lot of the stuff, people I feel like are confused here, and maybe it's because I cut out the page, but right when Ethan is mentioned, there's a whole page just redacted. And then it tells where the autopsies and stuff were performed and all that, and some of that's redacted. But there was a whole page missing that was redacted that I just didn't print off because all it said on it was redacted, right? So it feels like, and when you go back to it, there's no real information. Like they give you the information about Kaylee and Maddie being in the bed, both stabbed multiple times. They give you other information about it, but you hear really nothing about Ethan except that he was also in Xana's room, right? So I feel like maybe there's something to that. But then when you have a struggle, you have somebody fighting back, and the witness, I guess, would she be a witness? I know everybody's saying she's a victim too, and I mean she's a victim of the burglary. She's a victim of finding her other friends murdered, but she didn't get murdered. She didn't get attacked. So she's in there. She hears the speaking and the crying, but she doesn't hear the fight. She doesn't hear the struggle. She doesn't hear anything else going on. And then she opens the door for the third time and sees a man dressed all in black, wearing a mask, walking out. it scared her to the point where she freezes in place as he walked past her. Then she shuts the door and goes back in the room. Now, I agree that we don't know what she did when she walked back in the room. Did she try to text the other people? Did she try to call and make sure that they were all okay? Did she call anybody else and talk to them? We don't know, but she didn't call anybody to come check it out, and she never come back out of the room to go check it. A lot of people say, well, maybe she didn't have her phone with her, but we're talking about a 19, 20-year-old college girl in the middle of the night, awake at 4 in the morning. She don't have her phone? Are we serious? Does she have a laptop in her room? Does she have a computer in her room? Even if she didn't have a phone, she would have a way to contact somebody in her room at college. Then if she's scared and locks herself in the room, she's probably not going to sit in there for 8 hours with nothing going on, nobody trying to get in the house, nobody saying anything, and then come out and find, the odor of death and blood all through the house, because police said that the odor in the house was really strong. I mean, they sat in there for 8 hours between the time that the murders happened and the time anybody found them, right? I, I hate saying it where it sounds heartless. That bothers me to say it that way, right? But if she's scared, freezing in place when the guy walks out, she's listening, right? She's in the room scared with the door locked. She knows he never comes back in the sliding glass door. She knows nobody ever tries to mess with her stuff. Even after, I get if she didn't check for 30 minutes, if she waited and hid for 30 minutes, but 8 hours? She had to fall asleep. Now, she probably didn't assume anything like that happened, but what did she hear? And then with the way the police said that she didn't know him in that affidavit, that's kind of strange too, because they didn't say she didn't recognize him. They said that she didn't say that she recognized him. So that's weird. That's a weird way to say that she didn't know who he was, that he was just a stranger, right? And the fact that she assumed intruder and was scared, so she didn't say anything to him walking by, thank God. But it's just weird. And maybe she was just drunk and she was trying to process it all and couldn't, and passed out drunk and woke up later. Who knows? But then all the weird secrecy around the 911 call, and maybe it's for a purpose, but all of it just makes it look so bad. And then Bethany is on the first floor, right? Like, her room was the only one that was actually on the first floor. I wonder if Dylan and Bethany used to be on the first floor, and then when the one roommate moved out, Dylan moved upstairs. That's probably what happened, and they probably just ended up leaving it there. We'll see you later, Brenda. I don't know. It's just weird. All of it's so weird. It doesn't really make sense. And it's because we don't have the whole story. We don't have what the police say they believe happened, like word for word, event for event. And then we don't have Brian's excuses yet for why his DNA was on the sheet, why his phone was pinged in that way, why he took his phone, turned his phone service off right in that area, popped it up, when he come back. And they still haven't found the weapon. Now, I have a little theory, but with Dylan seeing him dressed all in black with the mask and all that, it might hurt my theory a little. I was thinking that maybe he wore some thin coverall suit, like a Tyvek suit, a chemical suit, like Breaking Bad suit, you know what I'm talking about, the yellow suit, and where they have the face shield. I was thinking maybe he had one of those on, and when he committed the murders, then he stripped all that off, stuck it in a waterproof bag with the weapon. That way he didn't have anything on him when he went out. He would leave nothing in his car, and then he would go and get rid of that before turning his phone location back on. I don't believe that he would have kept that all the way until a month later when he's driving to Pennsylvania. Maybe he would, but it doesn't seem like a good idea, even though it seems like this guy, even though he has all the education and knows all the stuff and wanted to help the Pullman Police Department with their crap, their online text searches, and breaking down the data of cases. Basically, he wanted to help them. It seems weird that he made so many mistakes, or he did things like even even the Brian Walsh guy left his phone at home when he went and allegedly went and got rid of his wife's body. Um, why would Bryan Kohberger take his phone with him at all? Why wouldn't he leave it on at home to leave the sign there if he knows they're going to be looking for that? It's just weird, right?
Room and 911 wasn't called for another 8 hours. In the affidavit, she said she froze, but Shannon Gray is offering support to her because so many people have questioned what she said and criticized her for not calling 911 immediately.
We all have to remember that she is a victim in this case. I don't know if anybody can, everyone's there to second guess what happened and how she should have or might have, could have reacted. She states I think in the affidavit that she froze in that moment and then went back in her room and ultimately the 911 call wasn't made until later, 8 hours later, I believe, or something along those lines. But who knows? I mean, maybe she saw him and maybe she thought he was going out for a smoke on the.
Right, but if she just saw him and thought maybe he's going out for a smoke, why was she scared? And if, even if she was just, oh, it caught me off guard, I didn't expect it, and then maybe she knows he never came back, so why not check then? After all the rest of the evidence that, like maybe her mind was too intoxicated to process everything. Maybe that's just the simple explanation. Malcolm's razor. She was too messed up to process everything going on, and she just remembers it. But that's going to be something that the defense is going to destroy her with in court if that's what she says.
Out on the deck and coming back in. Who knows what was going through her mind? But I don't think anybody should be putting any blame or anything on her about anything. And the family feels the same way. She's going through a traumatic incident where she had 4 roommates that were murdered. She was able to garner some information that helped out the affidavit, the identification of the black clothes, of the black mask over his nose, the bushy eyebrows, approximate height, approximate build, very critical to the.
It feels like they're leaning a lot on the bushy eyebrow part too. I mean, how many people have bushy eyebrows? I have bushy eyebrows. I'm sure there's a lot of people out in Idaho that's got bushy eyebrows. He's a pretty generic sized person, 6 foot, 185 pounds. That's as average as you can get, really. I feel like the bushy eyebrows part is the main part of her and connecting him from her outside of the DNA and stuff, of course. But everything comes kind of together to lead up to it. But the bushy eyebrows part to me is kind of weak.
Investigation. If they bring in a guy that's 6'6" and doesn't match the description, right, then you have a different. But it seems in line with what the defendant looks like in this case to a certain degree. So, and maybe they find dark clothes and they find a dark mask in some of the locations that they've done. So she's really, I think everyone should be praising her for getting an identification and being able to give that solid information there and not look about what she might have or could have or done, because we have no idea what mental state she was going through at that time.
The spring semester started on Wednesday, January 11th, and that means all of the students went back to class. That included Ethan Chapin's 2 siblings. Ethan was a triplet, and all 3 of them attended the University of Idaho. And Ethan Chapin's parents placed a statement out on Facebook. It reads, "The support from the University of Idaho and Moscow PD and Idaho State Police has been profound. Maisie and Hunter are rock stars, and we couldn't be more proud of them. Their job now is just to be kids, start where they left off, keep goals and aspirations in mind. Ethan is who he was because of our family. His foundation was unwavering. He was so loved he didn't know any different. The stories are endless and amazing. He touched lives we had no idea existed. Ethan was incredible.
And that's a good point, too. I mean, the students at some point have to get back to normal life, right? They can't just forever be hung up on what happened to their friends, what happened to their brothers. They have to go back, they have to continue their life and live, in a way that the victims would be proud of them for, right? Um, I hate it for the brother and sister who has to go back there. Nobody's, convicted yet. They're wondering there's probably all kinds of people there who have things to say, or, all the rumors that go around that the families have to deal with. And I mean, it definitely, you feel for them in it, but I think the parents are right on track there to say that the rest of their kids still have a life to live, and they gotta keep going forward. They can't just let this derail their lives, because in some instances, something like this might derail somebody's life.
Ethan's parents went on to say that they've met with prosecutors, and anything that they or Ethan had is now frozen by the defense. That includes 2 vehicles, any of his belongings, and a set of golf clubs.
We are going to ask the court to set preliminary hearing out into June. We would request the 3rd or 4th week of June, and probably 4 or 5 days for preliminary hearing. Mr. Kohberger understands his right to a timely preliminary hearing, and he's willing to waive the timeliness to allow us time to obtain discovery in this case.
Ann Taylor is Bryan Kohberger's public defender.
Now, for anybody who's saying, I know I said this a while ago, I just want to say it again since that just came up. Anybody who's saying he's guilty because he would want it to be quicker if he really was innocent, he's facing the death penalty. I think timeliness is the last thing he's worried about. I think mostly he's worried about if he was innocent, okay? Let's live in that world for us. This case is hanging over him. The main thing he's going to be worried about is making sure that he gets enough evidence and enough stuff to show his innocence before going to his pretrial hearing and stuff, right? He doesn't want, you don't want to get caught up in a trial if you really are innocent. Now, even if he's guilty, he's going to want his lawyers to have plenty of time to go through his case. It makes sense to me completely that he would be happy to postpone the trial and wait, 6 months in prison, in jail, whatever, protective custody, where his diet's being met, and they're working with him to make him comfortable because he's innocent until proven guilty, right? It makes sense to me that he would wait that 6 months rather than rush and all of a sudden end up in a fight for his life. It makes sense, even if he's guilty, that he would want to look for anything that could get him off.
And she requested a preliminary hearing for her client, but asked that it be scheduled almost 6 months from now. Some attorneys were kind of surprised by that, while others were not. This will actually give the defense time to look through evidence that they received from the prosecution. That's called discovery. The investigation, of course, is ongoing, as is processing of evidence, including examining data from his electronic devices. His white Hyundai Elantra is also being processed for evidence. The amount of evidence turned over to the defense in this case will be voluminous, likely terabytes worth of data.
The statement of him being exonerated implicitly meant that he would.
So, crime sleuthing, you asked, could I look and see how many bathrooms are on the 2nd floor? It looks like there's just the one. It looks like it's the one right beside Ethan and Xana's bedroom. And I don't see another bathroom on that floor. It doesn't say that any of them are master bedrooms or anything that have a bathroom. It just shows the one bathroom between the stairwell from the 1st and 2nd floor and the kitchen, basically. The one leading right into Ethan and Xana's room, which... Was the door shut at Ethan and Xana's room? Does anybody know that? Like, was the door shut back after he walked out, or was it left open? Has anybody reported that yet to tell us what they said? Because if the I really have the hard time accepting the fact that she opened the door in time to see him walking by, that he didn't see her. Maybe he had tunnel vision, maybe his adrenaline was through the roof and he's walking out. But it's hard to think that he didn't see her. But if he did see her, it seems like he would have killed her also, unless he was just exhausted or, panicking, tunnel vision, trying to get back to his safe space, back in his car where he felt secure and away from everything that had just taken place. But if he has no emotions, if he doesn't live with any regret, would he be searching out a safe place? Early reports was both bedrooms were locked. The door was left open. See the medics report on YouTube. Okay, so that worked. I think the PCA stated police officers opened Xana's door. No facts on the door to anyone's room. Sliding glass doors don't get locked from the outside, always inside. Yeah, but that wasn't true at all. Okay, so we don't know if the doors were open or shut. But if the doors were open, then she couldn't have went to the bathroom, right? That's just, she would have saw what went on, especially a gory scene like that. I would like to understand the 911 call, right? Because we know I have that one video up, my biggest video I've ever had on YouTube, of the 911 call, of what was going on when the 911 call was placed. It seems like parts of that couldn't have been true, just according to the police reports and stuff. But maybe it was. I wonder when they're going to release the 911 call and when we're going to get to really get an understanding of how the story played out. Or is it going to be trial to where we find out how Dylan and Bethany ended up finding them, who called 911? Because up on making it somebody used the roommate's phone to call 911, but they didn't say it was or wasn't the roommate that did it, or which roommate. The only thing is a call for an unconscious person. Man, it's just, my mind goes like everywhere. I've got ADHD and my mind just blows up when I start thinking about all this, because I try to revert back, right? I live a different lifestyle now. I don't live nothing like what I used to live, but I used to live a pretty party style, co-ed softball all weekend, drinking all weekend, partying before I had kids and stuff when I was like 21, 22 years old. Just up all night, wake up early the next morning, go do it again, just party mode, right? And in those situations, I can see some of this happening. But then when you bring and you throw all this together, it feels like a big pile of shit. It doesn't feel like a legitimate story, or it feels like we're getting a lot of stuff left out that we should be told, or not should be told like we have the right to it, but we should be told to make the story make sense. And like I said, they were on Bryan Kohberger since like 2 weeks into the investigation. Is it possible that them being zoned in on him might have caused them to overlook some other things? I don't know. I'm not trying to say anybody else is involved that we know of, because we didn't know of Bryan Kohberger, right? And he ends up being the main suspect, the one that's arrested, the one that's charged with the crime. So like I said before, it's not a movie. We don't get to know all the characters, but it possibly could be somebody we know of. It possibly could be somebody else that we don't know of. It was so fast, and the stuff makes no real sense when you think about that. He come in, walks past Dylan's room, goes up to the third floor. Kaylee and Maddie were both found still in the bed, so I don't feel like they put up much of a fight, but somehow he leaves his sheath behind. Let's talk about the sheath for a minute. All right, so some of you guys might not know this, but I am a knife nut. It's not near as bad as it used to be, but this whole YouTube channel started off as doing knife reviews and stuff. That was the first type of video I ever thought about making, because I collect higher end knives, users, and some that, save queens, but just a knife sheath. We're going to talk about a knife sheath. Go where I can see this. Make it a little bigger real quick for a minute. All right. So a knife sheath, right? It's got a belt loop. You would think that somebody would put the knife sheath on their belt loop. Otherwise, they're carrying it. They're carrying the knife in like this. So then you've got touch DNA all over this sheath, right? Especially you switch hands, you're doing stuff, you're moving, you're carrying the knife. So you would have to pull this knife out, right? And then put the sheath down, use the knife, and then never pick the sheath back up in the middle of a planned murder. Does that make sense? Or would it make more sense that he actually had the sheath on his belt and somehow while committing the acts, it got caught on something, snagged, pulled off, and he never knew it was missing until he was leaving, walking out of the house with, from Xana and Ethan's room, because that's the order apparently, Maddie and Kaylee, and then down to Xana and Ethan's room. He had to realize then that the sheath was gone, did he not? Unless he did strip down, throw everything into a bag, but it seems like the sheath would have been part of that. So he had to know that the sheath was gone before he left the house. Otherwise, he's walking across college campus carrying a knife, a big bloody knife. It just, maybe he noticed it was gone, but saw her looking at him and panicked or something. It just don't make sense. My mind just can't wrap around how that goes, how you get to that, how everything lines up. But anyway, let's make me smaller again. And get back in, because I want to watch some other stuff. I want to try to catch up. I've been so busy. I haven't had a lot of time to pay attention to anything new coming out.
Was innocent of the crimes. He used the word exonerated. That's why we put that in the statement.
Jason Labar represented Bryan Kohberger for several days following his arrest in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. He's actually the chief public defender for that county and represented Kohberger during the extradition proceedings. I spoke with Labar about the probable cause affidavit and possible defenses he sees.
It's a strong circumstantial case, but the evidence, when it's viewed individually, you can attack that evidence as a defense attorney. If you take the DNA evidence that's recovered from the sheath, for instance, I believe that to potentially be touch DNA, transfer DNA, which would mean that it could remain on that sheath for an indefinite period of time if undisturbed. That's one way of attacking that type of evidence that doesn't put him at the scene of the crime the night of, just that he merely touched that sheath at some point in time. The ID by DM is obviously going to be contested at the time of the preliminary hearing. I don't believe hearsay is admissible in Idaho under the rules, so it would be likely that DM is going to testify at the preliminary hearing when it gets to that point, so cross-examine key in the case.
Labar told me he will continue.
Okay, so on that lawyer, I got to give my opinion on this guy real quick. I believe what he's saying is accurate. Like the defense is obviously going to attack every piece of evidence that they have against him to try to cast doubt on that evidence, whether they can or can't. That's their whole job. But he's not important. He's not part of Bryan's team at all. He's trying to attach his name as one of Kohberger's defense attorneys. And I feel like he's doing that because he believes there's a chance that Bryan ends up beating this case and then his defense attorneys become famous. It's not like Johnny Cochran famous, but in the same realm of understanding that's what he's going for. It can blow his name up, blow his practice up, if he can attach himself somehow to Bryan Kohberger. So basically clout chasing. if you know what that is. He's basically clout chasing the name and giving his opinion, and his opinion seems accurate. I believe that's what, if I was the defense attorney, I would be going, hey, I don't have to prove he didn't. You have to prove he did. And the evidence that you've supplied doesn't necessarily prove that he did. It doesn't do it beyond a reasonable doubt. And also, we don't know what else the police have on him right now. And the defense might not even know what else the police have on him right now. But before they go to court, they all have to know. The prosecution's going to know what the defense's plan is, and the defense is going to know everything that the prosecution has on them. Like, they're going to know which witnesses, who is going to call. You can bet your butt that Dylan is going to be called up on the stand by the defense so that they can try to throw things, throw the wrench into her story or ask all the questions that we're all asking. Let's go. But that's just my opinion on that lawyer. I feel like he's doing it to try to keep his name relevant, put his name out there. But he's not wrong. Just because he's clout chasing doesn't mean that he's wrong.
To work with Bryan Kohberger's family. They are located in Pennsylvania, although he's no longer a member of the defense team. So that's it for the 7 developments that we've seen since the release of that probable.
Okay. So
I'm Anjanette Levy, and thanks for joining.
This is more Law and Crime. Law and Crime and News Nation. That's like my go-to places for whenever I want to learn about the news of the case. Law and Crime, that's my favorite. And then News Nation, if you take away Chris Cuomo, because I don't like Chris Cuomo, but I don't really care for his coverage. But Ashley Banfield, I like listening to their, because Ashley isn't scared to say what people are thinking. Now, a lot of the guests and stuff really like to bash the true crime community, it seems like. All the FBI agents, they hate us for whatever reason. But as far as the news goes, you get a lot of information from Law and Crime and News Nation. This is Idaho Murders, Bryan Kohberger, case examined by former Idaho Attorney General. So I wonder what this guy has to say about it.
Joining us here on Law and Crime. Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students, was back in a Latah County courtroom on Thursday morning. And at that time, his attorney asked that a preliminary hearing be pushed out until the last week of June. They want to last between 4 and 5 days, or at least they're requesting an entire week, so they can question witnesses that the prosecution will put on to show that there is probable cause that Bryan Kohberger is the person who committed these crimes. He's accused of breaking into a house in Moscow, Idaho, in the early morning hours of November 13th and murdering Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernot. This development in the case is Dave Leroy. He is a former Attorney General for the state of Idaho. Dave, welcome here to Law and Crime. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome. Nice to be with you.
What are your thoughts on Ann Taylor requesting a preliminary hearing and saying, no, we want it not, we're going to waive the speedy, trial rights. We want this pushed out until the last week of June, and we need 4 to 5 days for it.
Well, it certainly was predictable that the matter would be moved out for some period of time.
Right.
Because in complicated cases, defense always here and elsewhere around the country wants to get as much evidence as they can in their hands by way of discovery. And that would be police reports, witness statements, scientific reports, all of the kinds of things that might have some probative value on the question of probable cause, either that the offense was committed or was committed by this defendant. So it's entirely predictable that additional time was asked for. 6 months is probably not unreasonable in this case, given how it's come together with evidence on several different tracks, each of those tracks being susceptible of a different kind of analysis by the defense. So that's not surprising at all. And a date certain in June is a reasonable way to go forward. It gives the public some notice and expectation. It gives the defense the opportunity to explore. And it gives the prosecution, as well, an additional opportunity to pull together its investigative materials and continue to find evidence to the extent that it can. The request for full.
So he's basically just saying the same thing, right? That obviously they would want more time to go through because it's a complicated case and somebody's life hangs in the balance, right? Well, what are we talking about in chat? If the bodies were ever removed, we would have seen it. They definitely removed the bodies, bud. I mean, the bodies aren't still in the house. They've had their funerals. They've had their autopsies done. They probably took them out discreetly, and people probably had enough respect not to film it like overly. I'm sure if you searched enough, you'll find somebody has footage of something coming out of the house, but they're definitely not there.
4 or 5 days is highly theoretical, because it's up to the prosecutor to choose what evidence is put on at that hearing. If they decide that they want to put on 1 day's worth of evidence, then that's probably how long that hearing will last, plus cross-examination. But leaving a large block of time available for possible inquiry by both the defense of all of the prosecution witnesses.
If you guys have anything that you think that I should watch, let me know. Because I'm just trying to catch up on any new developments that came out in this that I haven't caught in the last couple of days, because I haven't really had a lot of time to dig into it and watch it. It's been pretty hectic, like I said earlier.
Is certainly a possibility. I should note that at a preliminary hearing in Idaho under our criminal rules, hearsay is permitted as to evidence of scientific tests done by government agencies or state licensed laboratories. So it will not always be necessary to call all of the witnesses that one must have at trial at a preliminary hearing, where certain of those hearsay rules are permitted at a preliminary hearing.
So for instance, if a detective is on the stand testifying, Bill Thompson could hypothetically ask, okay, so, and though he didn't conduct the testing, he just received the results.
Precisely correct. Not only would he have that test in hand and show it and put it into evidence, but they wouldn't necessarily have to show a chain of evidence back to a laboratory. They wouldn't have to show the credentials of the laboratory expert. They wouldn't have to have that expert testify, et cetera, et cetera. In a sense, and in fact, the laboratory report would speak for itself as to whatever appeared to be the reliable conclusions contained therein.
Mm-hmm. And how many, I mean, you said it's up to the prosecutor, obviously. Bill Thompson and the woman assisting him, they will kind of lay out how they are going to do this. And they can call one witness, they can call 5 witnesses. It's really up to them.
Precisely. And they could put in the evidence, which we already know about in the affidavit for arrest, and do that through one or more officers, one or more witnesses, or they could put in additional materials, which they may.
Now, hopefully the police do have additional stuff to put in, because if it's just the warrant, like just the information they have from the warrant, the phone pings, like I said, they're not exact, and it all comes down to beyond a reasonable doubt, I guess. You know, you can't have any doubt that this person did it if you're going for the death penalty. You have to be able to prove that he did.
But at this point, we have a date certain, but we don't have any certainty about what the prosecutor will show there. We merely know that they will have to meet the test of probable cause to believe that an offense was committed and that this defendant did it.
And I think people need to keep in mind too, the discovery in this case is going to be voluminous. There's so much video evidence, around 20,000 tips. So we're talking terabytes of information. Plus, We know that the vehicle was being searched. It was seized during Kohberger's arrest, which happened just about 2 weeks ago. And, there are still lab results coming in, plus any other tips or information they are investigating. So it's going to be a lot.
I wonder if all that's going to get sealed too, though. I wonder if we're going to get to find out if they found blood in the car, if they found the victim's DNA in the car, or is all that just going to be, we're not going to know until trial. We're not going to know until they're prosecuting and throwing the evidence, because it seems like we should at least know that much, right? Like, is there more tying him to it or not? You don't have to be specific with what it is, but is there more than just what we know about that ties Kohberger to it? Look at him right here where it's paused at. That is a wild face. And I saw somebody earlier ask about his dad flying out, right? To me, that's not unusual at all. I don't know, maybe that's just my dad, but if I was going to drive across country by myself to come home for Christmas, I don't think it's that big of a stretch to think that my dad would fly out to do the road trip back with me. That doesn't mean that the dad's involved or anything, or that the dad knows. I don't think the dad knows, just because while they were pulled over, those body cams, the dad was just being way too talkative. And you could see Kohberger, especially on the first one, just like giving those glares back at his dad. Like, why are you telling him we're coming from Washington State? Why are you telling him we're going all the way to Pennsylvania? Why are you talking about this incident that went on? Like, you could see, like, just the looks he gave his dad. He didn't want to give up that much information. Now, that does make him look bad, make him look guilty, but he is a criminal justice major, so, and going for his doctorate in criminology, so he probably knows you're not supposed to talk to the cops. Don't give them any more information than you have to. I mean, I don't want to say that. You should talk to the cops. You should be helpful to help solve crimes. You shouldn't incriminate yourself just by throwing out worthless information to communicate with cops, because they are not joking when they say anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You never just openly give information out to the cops about yourself unless you really have zero fear that they're going to try to pin anything on you, because the more information you give them, the easier it is for them to connect you to stuff, especially if you're guilty.
As far as homicide cases go in Idaho, this has got to be the biggest homicide case that the state has seen, at least in recent memory, aside from the Daybell case that's going on in another part of Idaho.
I was going to qualify your comment by a reference to the Daybell case, which another era in Idaho, it seems 2 or 3 years ago now, began with that difficulty. But it's a complicated case, clearly, but it's also a focused case in some sense, in that you've got one crime scene, you've got one defendant, you've got one chain of evidence that links those two. And so in some regards, it's not as complicated as other crimes that have been prosecuted in this case, in this state, but it certainly is one that has captured national attention, has destroyed the feeling of safety in a college community. It has many, many social and cultural and criminal justice applications and implications. It will be up to Idaho, and I think will rise to the challenge to provide a fair and objective trial in this case to Mr. Kohberger, who is presumed to be innocent at this time.
And in your experience, I mean, do you see this trial happening a couple of years out? Because, we'll have the preliminary hearing and then an arraignment, obviously some other.
Without bond, I don't believe that this trial goes out that far. I mean, there's one thing to not rush it, it's another thing to stretch it out. If the case is pushed out years, I'd probably just at that point be married to the idea that he probably is guilty and he's looking for, whatever crumb he can use to beat the system however he can, whether he can find some bad information somewhere that got said or something that he could use to have the case overturned or appealed. A couple years for an innocent person in jail, I don't think that they'd be super happy to sit and wait, even with the death penalty hanging over their head, unless the police have a crap ton more evidence and you have to beat all that evidence. And at that point, I doubt you're probably not innocent if they've got everything tying you to it. Right now, we don't know. Right now, it could really be like people setting up Kohberger. It really could be that. We don't know otherwise. It could be somebody did it with a knife they had got from him at some time. It could be somebody closer to them, and he could have just been someone who had came to a party one time and maybe accidentally touched a knife sitting on the counter or something. As unlikely as that is, it's still technically a possibility.
Other things will take place, pretrial motions. There's always the possibility of a plea deal, although Bryan Kohberger is maintaining his innocence here.
I feel like they did
Well,
too, JP.
the good thing about Idaho is that we can try cases, felony cases, within 6 months, as we're constitutionally required to do here, because we have open courtrooms and juries and judges available to do so. So the pace with which this case will proceed will entirely be related to, first and foremost, his right to a swift trial. Secondly, the chemistry between the defense and the prosecution about exploring things, discovery, the delivery of documents, materials. I suspect that the defense will ask either the trial judge or the magistrate for additional investigative authority and additional investigators of this specialty or that, et cetera. So we'll have to see. It could indeed tend over a year or two if we're actually headed to a jury trial. On the other hand, we're ready to try this case in 6 months as constitutionally required if the defense wishes to do so.
Change of venue, is that something you see happening? Are those, is that
so.
used, that tool, moving venue? Does that happen a lot in Idaho?
I think they're definitely going to have to prosecute him outside of Moscow. Especially the longer they push it out, the more people are going to have heard this or heard that or got an opinion. And like I said before, usually that's probably not that big of a deal, but in a small place like Moscow, where half the population is college students at the college that all this happened at, and then the rest of them are all local, and this is a national case, it could get hard to find a jury in Moscow. I believe he's got to say, yeah, it's a good chance it'll get moved.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't happen a lot, but it certainly is contemplated in character cases of this unique character. Waitau County is a county of 40,000 people. The university has about 11,500 students. This case has riveted those communities like no other in probably the entire history of the University of Idaho, going back to 1889.
So 40,000, not 25.
So to presume that there's someone in Waitau County who hasn't heard about the case, doesn't have opinions one way or another about the case, hasn't perhaps driven by the area of 1122 King Street just to see precisely where it's situated, is a false presumption, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it may be that both the prosecution and the defense ask for a change of venue to one of the more urban counties immediately north or immediately south of Waitau County, or perhaps even here to Boise, where I sit, the capital city, 300 miles away, or even to eastern Idaho, 400 or 500 miles away. All of those are possible, and I think probably likely here, given the circumstances and the dreadful nature of this case.
And
This is a huge case.
So I really want to find something that's got a little more oomph to it, something that can create a little more conversation than this monotone guy. Let's see what's on News Nation. Let's see if they've got anything that's come out. And then we'll see if anybody wants to come up and talk on StreamYard after we see if any new information has come out that I haven't seen yet. Because so far it feels like it's just the same old, you know. May not be able to use insanity plea. I doubt he uses insanity plea. I want to find some stuff on the incel stuff because that confuses me. For why they believe so strongly, like why that takes such a hold on people. Let's check her out. Let's see what she's got as Cuomo. All right. So this is the girl he went on the Tinder date with that posted to get attention because why else would she mention that she went on a date with him years ago? And then when she got that attention, she didn't like that attention that she got. Now, people should definitely be respectful. Like, it's not okay just because somebody comments on something that people just go out and disrespect them. But the way she talked in the last interview I saw of her, it was like you knew this was going to happen. So it really makes no sense that you're acting surprised, especially after the things that you said.
All right? And I see proof. I see reason to first guest. So let's go to the introduction for the first guest. This is interesting, okay? We're going to meet someone who says, I knew him several years ago. We went on a date. And she had a very memorable experience with him. Nothing tragic or so. But thank you for doing this. And let's start with the basic. How sure are you that Bryan Kohberger is the same person that you went on the date with some years ago?
100%.
Because?
He just has a very memorable face. And
About what you remember about this young man.
The big takeaway is that he seemed completely normal until, we got back to my dorm, and then he got kind of pushy.
All right, now let's try to feel this out because you've been on plenty of dates, I'm sure, and it's not unusual for somebody to behave in a way you don't like, but this now matters to you. You say that there was a moment where he was touching you, not in a creepy way, but he was definitely touching you, and you brought it up, and that's when things changed. How so?
Yeah, he was touching me, and, I just asked, why are you touching me? And he immediately got very serious, and he said I didn't. And I just was like, okay, but you are touching me. And he was like, no, I'm not touching you. And he just got very defensive about it. So I just let it go after that. But it was very weird.
Now, people can get defensive, but everything that you've learned since made you see this through a little bit of a different lens. Explain that to me.
Yeah, exactly. This is a date I definitely told my friends about just because it was a little weird, and especially his last comment to me. However, I haven't really thought about it until I saw his face again, and, it made me look at it like, wow, he really could have hurt me or anyone, really.
Okay, so I do want to say this real quick. If you're on Tinder and you're going and meeting up and going on dates with strangers, I get that that's what most people do these days, and that's how it works. But if you're a female and you're going to meet up with a strange guy, I wouldn't bring him back to my dorm on that first date. And just be careful. Go meet them at the public place. Don't have them come pick you up. That's stupid. Don't let them know where you live just based, because you want to go on a date and eat some nice food. Don't let them know where you live. Go meet them there. Hang out with them there. and then leave them in public until you get to know them, because you never know what kind of crazy person is on Tinder swiping right on your profile. Like, just as sketchy to me. I'm glad that I like missed that whole era. Like, I was already, you know, settled down by the time Tinder and all that blew up big.
And what did he tell you about himself that you remember?
We just had a lot of small talk. I remember we talked about the fact that we were both psych majors at the time. So I don't really remember any specific conversations or any specific details about them, but it was all very normal.
How shocked are you to see him doing a perp walk now, connected to such a heinous set of murders, at least temporarily, until police make the case?
It scares me because I was very young and dumb, and I didn't think twice about having anyone, know who I was meeting up with, where I was going, what I was doing, and it all could have ended very differently. And that makes me worried for other young women that, they think they're invincible and don't think twice about, telling someone where they're going or who they're going on a date with.
Well, hey, thank you for watching. Please go to...
Okay, so that was basically useless. But yeah, I mean, seriously, if you're meeting people on Tinder, don't let them have your address until you know who they are. That's so stupid. Like, don't bring them back to your house that night. I mean, do what you want to do. You're an adult, do what you want to do, but don't put yourself in a very bad situation. And just all she said was that he was touching her, and she asked him why he was touching her, and he said he wasn't touching her while he was touching her. All I can think about in my head is my little 5 and 6-year-old boys. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. What is that even? That was like a waste of 4 minutes for sure. That's why I don't like Chris Cuomo. Oh, sorry. I know some of y'all probably fans of his, but not a fan of him or the Love Go. Here we go, though.
There is still one big unanswered question hanging over the Idaho murder case, and that is why. If Bryan Kohberger really is the killer, why? Why did he do it?
Exactly.
Right now, it appears there is only one person in the world who knows the answer, and Kohberger ain't talking. But there might be a way for the rest of us to retrace the steps that led him into that cold Moscow jail cell.
Oh, one more thing. While I'm thinking about it, I want to talk about this because I haven't discussed this anywhere yet. Where people were saying he had access through his doctorate program to body cam footage and surveillance footage, and he could have studied the girls from the calls, but apparently today I was watching a video on it that the Moscow police doesn't participate in that program. So he wouldn't have had that body cam footage of what was going on at the girl's house and stuff. He couldn't just tap into that. He had access to other police departments' body cam footage and stuff. Don't know if he ever used it, but as far as that's not, he didn't find them through that because he didn't have access to that. And then the idea that Bryan has killed somebody before this. If he's our guy, it seems, he probably has. When his friends were talking about him back in school, they were saying things like he was real shy, reserved. He didn't talk much. He was overweight. He was bullied. And then in high school, over a summer or whatever, his mindset changed. He became a lot more confident and a lot more social and seemed happier. Now, this is the same time frame where he didn't really have emotion, didn't have any regrets, didn't have empathy for other people. He just didn't care. And that's a real thing, not having emotion, maybe that's why he's so interested in the psychology and the criminal mind and stuff, is because he's thinking the whole time, I don't have any conscience. I don't care about other people. I only care about myself. And then he goes and studies other people, trying to find other people like him. And he found those people in serial killers and stuff. And then, there's his mom wrote an article about how people shouldn't have been cheering for Ted Bundy when he was finally dead and the casket and the hearse going through, people were cheering. She wrote an article talking about how disgusting that was and how you shouldn't cheer for anyone's death. There's a lot that brings in with his family and the serial killer stuff. You have to think maybe his mom was seeing what was going on with him and his mental health and the things that he was going through, maybe realizing that he was possibly a sociopath, that he was, maybe on the line to go and become one of these type of people. So she was maybe studying these people. I feel like there was something about his dad too with the serial killer stuff and was into serial killers or had something wrote about serial killers. And then obviously with him studying the psychology, then criminal justice, then criminology, feels like he was really going somewhere. And like he was headed in a direction. And I still can't write off that this isn't just some experiment for him to see, does he have the solution to get away from this? Did he leave the sheath on purpose to show how he could beat the evidence and something like that? Because if they don't have anything else, like I said, that's getting there. That's getting pretty sketch. But did he have that or did he not? And why is he, like, him and his family seemingly so interested in serial killers? Is that something that his parents were worried about, while he was growing up, and why they gave so much attention to serial killers and the mindsets of other people because they were comparing it to their son? Because anytime your kid does something crazy, anytime my son wants to put some beetle or something into a vice and crush it, I'm like, oh, is he going to be a psychopath, No, that's not okay. We don't just torture things. We don't do things, It always puts that right back in your mind, like, yeah, that's normal for a child, right? That's not crazy. And then you go to worrying about it. Or at least I do. Like I said, ADHD, mind runs in circles. It just is what it is.
A series of posts that were found online, some of them really disturbing, just might have been written by Kohberger when he was a teenager. Here's an example from 2011 when he was 16. It reads, "I see a large intensity of black, yellow, white fuzz. It makes my mind fizzle, and I can barely keep in the bounds of reality. It is as if the ringing in my ears and the fuzz in my vision is simply all of the demons in my head mocking me." Dozens and dozens of posts like this were written on a site called Tapatalk, in a forum for people who believed that they were suffering from a condition called visual snow syndrome. News Nation has not been able to independently verify that these are Kohberger's early posts, but there are strong indications that they are. And I'm joined now by the two people who found them. Lauren Mathias is a reporter who's been following this case very closely, and John Mathias, her husband, is a clinical and forensic psychologist who's done a deep dive.
So what's visual fuzz? What does that mean? I've never heard of visual fuzz. I need to get an understanding of that real quick. Because if not, then I'm just going to wonder about that the whole time. Visual snow syndrome. It's an uncommon neurological condition in which the primary symptom is that affected individuals see persistent, flickering, white, black, transparent, or colored dots across the whole visual field. Other common symptoms are palinopsia, enhanced. I'm not reading these words. The condition is typically always present and has no known cure. As viable treatments are still under research, migraine and tinnitus are common comorbidities and are both associated with a more severe presentation of the syndrome. As commonly appears at birth. Visual snow can appear at any time, but it commonly appears at birth, late teenage years, and early adulthood. Causes unknown. Hyperexcitability of neurons and processing problems in the visual cortex. So, I mean, visual snow doesn't necessarily mean you're a psychopath or anything like that. That's kind of threw me off, but the rest of it sounds pretty bad.
Dive into what the posts might mean. Together they host the Hidden True Crime podcast. And welcome to both of you. Lauren, how did you make this discovery and how did you link it to Bryan Kohberger?
Yeah, it was the Hidden True Crime team that did this together. And there was a verified email address that we used that uncovered these writings from 2011, the post. The photo looks to be a side-by-side of Bryan. The username is an email that he used as well as his line, and he confirms his own birthday and a relative's address as well as living in Pennsylvania. So things do seem to add up, as well as the hundreds of pages that we have poured over reading. Everything matches up to look like this is Bryan Kohberger writing as a 16-year-old boy.
And there's like an array of writings. You say hundreds and hundreds of pages. That's just remarkable to start with from a teenager. But this went from...
So this isn't verified to be him, but it sounds like, what, Lauren, I guess is her name? What she just said was they verified a lot of factors, like his birthday, his name, his location, the age. An old email was verified back to being his. So, it most likely was him.
2009 to 2012, I think ages 14 to 17, John, and just sort of your overall impressions of the body of work as you went through it.
I think there's a couple pieces here that are most relevant. There's a couple pages that really kind of speak to his mental state at the time, but I think the overall picture that emerges here is this is a very troubled adolescent with many mental health issues. In fact, there's so many symptoms that he identifies, it's hard to know where to start.
Sort of all at the same time to hear that, because you think of a teenager suffering, but then you think of the person we're talking about, and it's hard to feel any sympathy at all if he's indeed the killer. Lauren, in 2009, the posts were pretty short. But then in 2010, they start to get longer. They're more confessional. They don't talk so much about his visual snow condition, whereas, it's a physiological situation where you see, it's a snowy out.
Anything recent or anything from childhood. Now I'm just a blank soul living in the now. My mind is never not on visual snow, and I always wonder what a normal person would be doing while I sit there and suffer. This whole thing has made me crazy. I feel like my life is pointless. And I won't be able to. Huh, that's weird. I feel like that sometimes too, though. I feel like I don't remember as much, but once you actually have things that trigger the memories, they all come back to me. But a lot of times I think, do other people have a better memory than me as far as their childhood and stuff? But I think that's just in my head and in a lot of people's head. I think a lot of people always feel like, is this normal or not? Do other people see it this way, or am I different, And then hopefully you can get your answer. But
life, basically. But these ones are more about his childhood and his life. Let me read this one. I can't remember anything recent or anything from childhood. Now I am just a blank soul living in the now. My mind is never not on visual snow, and I always wonder what a normal person would be doing while I sit there and suffer. This whole thing has made me crazy. I feel like my life is pointless because people can think about times with parents, childhood, memories, and be happy, and I won't be able to. Do we know, Lauren, if he ever got any help for this, if he saw a doctor, if anybody reached out to him and tried to treat him?
We don't know what medical help he got. We do see that on these posts throughout these years, he tries different diets. He works really hard to try an array of diets, which actually confirms what a relative and friends have said about him being a very strict vegan or strict eater. It seems that he thinks that's the cause of what is called visual snow. And I think that, but again, it goes further than these physical symptoms, which is why I had to, take this to my husband, Dr. John Mathias, because it talks, as you mentioned, about demons. It talks about him feeling like a criminal in one point, yet he doesn't have a record. And that's why I said, John, like, you've got to look at these. What do these mean? This can't all be health issues, right?
Well, one of them, let's talk about that, John. In 2011, he's sort of latching onto this toxin theory. He says, I'm going to talk to a good neurologist about this, one that is very open-minded. I think this really is the cause. It might be the arteries being inflamed. It could hurt very bad. This seriously could be an issue that's undiagnosed. And then he goes on in 2011 and starts to tell people how to treat themselves. Like, he starts kind of telling other users what they need to do for their problems. And here's what he says: visual snow is caused by toxins in our body. These toxins range from yeast overgrowth all the way to fungus. I believe I caused my visual snow by too much toxins from the sweetener I used, and also too much caffeine chemicals. I also lived in a moldy house. When something is happening in your brain that shouldn't, chemicals are being released that shouldn't. These chemicals are released because we have toxins that our body doesn't want. It is going haywire. John, do we know if this might have been the start of him becoming a vegan to try to treat himself? Because it certainly looks like he's telling everybody to, eat plant-based diets and fruit juices to heal themselves.
Well, obviously, if he tried a bunch of different diets to get, to find whatever cured him from his visual snow stuff, apparently something he did worked to help him out with it, or at least make him feel like this was the cause. Then it seems like he might have figured out what was bothering
problems and all of his mental health problems to the visual snow, right? And that's a big question mark about whether is the visual snow causing the mental illness, or is it the other way around? Is it the mental illness that's contributing to physical and somatic symptoms? Psychologists call that somatization. So I think it's a stretch to go from visual snow to the things he's talking about, the screams, the demons, right? Those are in the moral domain. Those are not in the medical domain. So he's taking some of these medical issues and he's trying to force into this mental illness box, I think, to some degree, when in fact we're probably talking about something that has more to do with values and is more about moral judgments, like being a criminal, than it is about medical issues.
In this one last line, he says, I feel like coming to terms could be a bad thing. It's ominous.
I believe I'm gonna take a little break for a few minutes and then come back and get back on, see if I can get it set up with StreamYard. That way I can get some people up and we can talk about it and have conversations. If anybody's interested in coming on live, hope I see you there. Shouldn't be very long, 20-30 minutes at the most, and I'll be back up. Just want to go get something to eat, something to drink, and then come back and see what's going on. So try to come back and do a little panel here in just a few. Anybody interested, just be on the lookout in about 30 minutes. Appreciate everybody watching, liking the video. Anybody who subscribed now that wasn't subscribed before, I appreciate that. I have no clue how the super chats and all that work. If anybody did that, I'm sorry that I didn't read anything, but I'm not doing live streams for super chats. I'm just doing it to hang out with, my viewers. So don't worry about sending none of that stuff. Don't worry about doing none of that. It's not going to change anything. Crime Sleuthing, I hope you're there when we come back on so I can bring you up. We can talk about it because you always have interesting things to say. Anybody else, all I need you to do is turn on your camera so I can see you before I bring you up. Otherwise, everybody's welcome.